idea that there are parallel universes and not only one is a very old one. It's found in Eastern metaphysics and Eastern religions, but also within the Western tradition in Renaissance and later, now in some forms of modern physics. But it's in many ways a kind of refreshing idea or a liberating idea, because it suggests that the world we live in, the cosmos we live in, is only one of many possible cosmoses, that we actually live in a kind of multiverse.
Oscar Wilde decía que ningún mapa del mundo está completo si no incluye el país de utopía, ¿no? Y bueno, de alguna forma esa es la verdad. Es decir, junto a los mapas reales, sobre los cuales también Borges ha escrito, ¿no? Esos mapas que son tan grandes como el propio país que describen, ¿no? Bueno, pues junto a los mapas reales están los mapas de lo imaginario, de lo soñado, de lo deseado. La mayoría de los seres humanos vivimos con un pie puesto en lo real, en lo inevitable, en lo necesario, pero con el otro en lo posible, en lo deseable. Borges juega con las ideas filosóficas clásicas, ¿no? Es decir, la idea de un mundo paralelo, de una alternativa a nuestro mundo, es una constante, ¿no? Los humanos siempre hemos estado preguntándonos qué ocurriría si no hubiera pasado lo que pasó, sino cosas diferentes, ¿no? Esos relatos históricos, por ejemplo, que dicen cómo sería el mundo si Hitler hubiera ganado la guerra o cosas por el estilo, ¿no? Eso es una tentación permanente, porque una vez que las cosas han ocurrido, las vemos como necesarias, pero como antes siempre nos han parecido que todos los futuros estaban abiertos, pues de alguna manera siempre hemos tenido la idea de que todo podía volver atrás, de que podía volver a hacerse algo diferente a lo que había ocurrido, ¿no? Yo creo que todos continuamos así, continuamos siempre habitando el mundo de lo real y de lo que conocemos, pero de alguna forma disparándonos un poco hacia el mundo de lo que anhelamos, ¿no?
Parallel universe, the fact that all kinds of projects have never been built. Let me think of a destroyed city, or a space in a city, where once there was a big building that everybody knew, or a new building that nobody knew, and somehow it doesn't exist anymore. An empty space, a terrain vague, indeterminate space. Those become the spaces that are invitations for those who have long lived in a city to actually recover all kinds of alternative histories, alternative visual orders. So whether it was a famous project that was never built, or a nondescript building chock full of local history, that is the place where our imagination can fill it in. Fill it in with either grand projects that were never built, or we can fill it in with our memories of some not very impressive building, but it's still there, we project. A given city has multiple worlds in it. There is an urban imaginary, and it's not just urban real estate.
We are always making choices about the places in which we live. And to me, the art of making a place is to then know how that dream has to be changed, modified, reimagined, because other people, real people, are in it and will be using what we have. Here are two projects, one by Boulez in the 18th century, which was an ideal project. This project was to be a tomb for Newton. And people were to walk through this like a planetarium. He never meant it to be built. This was a project that was simply an idea of what something could be. But he was an adult. He knew that this would never happen. Whereas this project by Le Corbusier from 1924 was an ideal project which he meant to be built. It basically destroys the Marais in Paris and puts up all these identical towers in its place. And we have built this project all over the world, South Korea, China, America. It is like a prison of towers in which there is no public life, no street life. It was an idea that was never subject to any kind of democratic restraint. So that is what I'm saying. The difference is, Boulez, fine, you know, because it's just what it is. It's a dream. But this is a dream that became a nightmare when it was built because there was no democratic intervention in softening it. I don't idealize the process of creation in a city the way I would idealize it in art. I am writing about this now. The fact that a lot of projects become frustrated by these material constraints is not entirely bad, because when we create something, we always imagine it to be full. You know, we have a dream of what something should be like. That's a very dangerous form of creation. We have to create that way, by imagining ideally what something should be like. But in the urban realm, unlike sculpture or painting, we shouldn't be allowed to realize our ideal because other people have to live in our dream. We have many ways for people democratically to intervene, citizens, in design. And that dialogue between the artist, the designer, and the public has meant that we have, on the whole, with some exceptions, really good habitable places in which to live and work.
Take Le Corbusier, the famous Plein Voisin. Isn't it great that it never was really quite built? Because now we keep talking about it. You know, we just keep thinking, imagining what it would have been with all the pros and the cons. If it would have been built, it would be a shambles. It would be a disaster. It would be like the what do we call, the banlieue. And we would say, out, out. Now it is a provocation. It makes us think, could it have been different if a great architect had built it? He put so much effort, he believed in it, etc., etc. The city is designed because it is, I mean, one way of describing it is that it is a complex but incomplete system. And in that mix lies its capacity to have a very long life, much longer than very powerful corporations, very powerful kings and queens, very powerful governments. That I say, je me lève le chapeau, I say, wonderful.
Hay una aplicación muy bonita cuando uno visita Nueva York, que en el iPhone van saliendo todos los edificios que se proyectaron en Nueva York y nunca lograron hacerse. Entonces vas por la calle y van apareciendo los edificios que alguien imaginó y que nunca se hicieron, ¿no?, a lo largo de las calles. Todos los grandes arquitectos que iban a haber hecho un edificio y por circunstancias que fuesen, no lo hicieron.
You know what's really interesting about all of these pictures is that there are no people in them. There are no people in any of these pictures. And I think when you take a look at what was being proposed in the 1920s or 30s was this sort of Futurama, right? Cities without people, cities all about the car.
Son todos demasiado grandes, a mí me gustan los sitios pequeños. Yo tengo más bien utopías minimalistas, no maximalistas. Estas son maximalistas todas, otras son, la gente es muy pequeñita toda, ¿no? Mis utopías son siempre un cuarto pequeño y yo con otra persona que me guste. Esa es mi utopía.
Mentally and physically, we are progressing toward new horizons.
Las utopías normalmente han sido ideas de cierre, carcelarias, ¿no?, terribles. La propia utopía de Tomás Moro, por ejemplo, es un lugar donde las leyes no cambiaban en 8000 años, donde todo había sido, de alguna manera, estaba prefigurado de antemano y nadie podía salirse de ese juego, ¿no? Pero yo creo que las utopías son el sueño de unos pocos que se convierten en pesadilla de todos los demás, ¿no? Y eso es cuando se han llevado a cabo. Después de todo, los campos de concentración son una idea utópica, es decir, una idea tomada de Dante Alighieri o de lo que se quiera. Las cosas más terribles que han pasado en la humanidad son precisamente, normalmente, utopías cumplidas, ¿no? De modo, yo prefiero, frente a la utopía, yo prefiero el ideal. Porque el ideal es aquello que no se alcanza nunca, es como el horizonte, ¿no? Es decir, es algo hacia lo cual se avanza, pero nunca llegamos. Por lo tanto, los ideales nunca nos encierran, siempre nos empujan hacia adelante, pero nunca nos encierran. En cambio, la utopía tiene una idea de cierre, de clausura, de cárcel, ¿no?
The idea of a telos in history or in the cosmos is a kind of great comfort to many people because it suggests that their values will somehow become the values of the whole world, the whole cosmos. So in that sense you could say it's a useful illusion, but it's also a dangerous illusion. The idea that human history has a telos, which really comes from religion, has, I think, been dangerous to ethics, particularly when it's been embraced, when it's been part of radical political projects. The Bolsheviks, for example, blew up churches, just physically destroyed a number of cathedrals in Russia during the earliest period of their persecution, and they carried on persecuting. There is a temptation to try and accelerate the telos, to try and speed up this process of reaching the goal.
I think of this notion of urban amnesia, a forgetting of urban histories. I really think that having empty spaces that are often spaces of destruction is critical for a kind of urbanity that cannot just lie in the architecture, that has to lie also in the imaginaries of people. So I mean, there are these wonderful examples. For instance, there's a huge parking lot in Los Angeles. Where else? Big parking lot, Los Angeles, yes. And it covered up a settlement of black people. There were not many black people in the West Coast. And total erasure of that history, right? You built. Actually, no. That empty zone that is a parking lot, especially when the cars are not there, is a provocation. You say, what was there before? We know in Central Park, the big park in New York, that one part was one of the first settlements of black people. Clearly black residential areas were devalued. So, and it suddenly becomes present. You are in that part of Central Park. You don't see the trees anymore. You see that which was erased. That is what a city does. So I really think that destruction is what cities can handle, in a way that few other things can handle. Think of cities, some of our good old cities have outlasted far more powerful actors. An empty space has speech.
I think it's interesting to see that city, which, debuted in the 1960s, with a very, I think, car-focused, very planner-focused strategy. And what we've found is a lot of times the best laid plans by the best laid planners don't turn out as they've expected.
La ville est formée par deux axes, le monumental est-ouest et le routier nord-sud. Les zones perpendiculaires à l'axe monumental ont la désignation des centaines, les supérieures impaires et les inférieures paires. Les zones perpendiculaires.
I mean, I've seen the pictures of Brasilia. It looks very pretty from the air, but from what I understand, the experience of the street is not quite the same. And so I think that cities that thrive are those cities that celebrate the spontaneous connections that happen and, provide that space for people to play and interact. And that's I think that's the glue that really holds cities together.
De cette façon, l'adresse à Brasilia est des plus simples. SQS 304B 52.
Some people loathe it because it is, again, a dream with no democratic intervention and
Dans
modification.
l'ensemble se détachent les édifices destinés aux pouvoirs fondamentaux, qui sont au nombre de 3 autonomes et qui trouvent dans le triangle équilatéral la forme exacte pour les contenir. À chaque
I have
angle de
mixed
cette place
feelings because the dream is so beautiful, unlike the plan voisin, and so varied, that I'm interested in the forms, but not being there physically.
du congrès situé au sommet et ceux de la
I'd like to look at pictures of Brasilia, but the 2 times I've been there, I wanted to flee.
L'adresse à Brasilia est des plus simples. SQS 304B.
Also in Brasilia, the fact that a whole city grew around it, which is a city of the poor mainly, a city of the servants, is to me part of what Brasilia is. This is a dream I really love, but not in person.
And I think what's really exciting to see is this evolution where city leaders recognize that the strength of cities are its people. And we need to design our cities and our streets for people and not for cars. Beautiful buildings are certainly a very important part of it, but as important as the beautiful buildings are how those buildings stick the landing. Do they relate? Do they make it attractive for you to walk around the base? How is the experience that you have in these cities? We're not going to be able to double deck our streets, and widen our streets to accommodate more and more people. You have to be able to have the kind of ballet of a city happen, the interaction. Really designing the streets with the people in mind. From the ground up, from a sort of foot-based strategy rather than a strategy that is 30,000 feet in the air looking down. So I think you're seeing the design profession evolve to really appreciate the importance of the environment that these buildings find themselves in and pay much more attention to the street level experience as much as they do to the sky experience. And, very important, I think, for the design profession, and certainly leads to much better results on the ground.
The office building of the 1960s spoke the language of, I'm an office building. And it was mostly office work. It was mostly secretaries and that. Today, in the centers of our cities, it's not secretaries. You have to find out what they're doing. And that is all these added complexities. It was completely missed in all the literature about global cities. And, so they just see the infrastructure, which is the built environment, as infrastructure. And that's a change. That's a very significant change, I think. All airports have a certain set of standards that they have to meet, etc. And they think all cities are becoming the same. They're becoming the same at the level of building, design, infrastructure. And so I argue what has happened is that more and more of these buildings, these state-of-the-art buildings, are infrastructure. How they get used is a question.
How do we take the environment we've inherited and use it for our own ends? It has a very practical point now, which is that climate change is changing the form of all cities.
Esos son los problemas. Yo creo que, como siempre, son problemas que antes se planteaban solo dentro de un país y ahora los vemos a escala mundial, ¿no? Antes pues decíamos, bueno, no quememos este bosque porque amenaza nuestras tierras que viven al lado. Hoy nos planteamos el problema del Amazonas o de cualquier otra cosa porque ya estamos pensando mucho más a lo grande, ¿no? Obligadamente. Tenemos esa tarea hercúlea, ¿no?, de tener que afrontar retos inmensos, porque, digamos, ningunos seres humanos han tenido unos retos como los que hoy tiene una persona si reflexiona sobre cómo es la situación mundial.
Something like an office tower with windows that don't open is a monster, a glutton for energy, to air condition it or heat it in the north and so on. We're not going to be able to afford many monstrous towers with windows that can't open in the future. The climate is changing, it's becoming too variable. We need to save energy. In London, most of the city was built near water on the assumption that the water table in London would always stay the same. But the water table, you know what I mean? The basic water in the city is rising, which means that many of these buildings that have been built at the edge of the river or farther to the east, built at the edge of the sea, are no longer usable. They're no longer practical, including the Houses of Parliament, another great icon. But its basement now is full of water. I will be long dead when this happens. But in 20 or 30 years, we're going to have to rethink the form of all the cities that we live in.
I think what's really exciting is that the future of the planet is in cities. And when you think about it, over half the world's population lives in cities right now, and that number is expected to get to 70% by 2050. The future of our planet is cities. And how we make our cities so that they are safe and attractive and environmentally sound for people is one of the big challenges. I think the future of cities is about choice. Right? I consider myself pro-choice. I'm pro-bike lanes, I'm pro-bus lanes, I'm pro-pedestrian plazas and safer streets. And that is the future of cities. And you're seeing cities around the world actually compete for who can be the greenest, who can be the most sustainable. And I think that's a wonderful competition to have. Because if we are going to accommodate the millions and millions of more people that are coming to live in our cities, we need to make them as affordable, as equitable, as healthy and environmentally sound as they can be. And I really do think it's very hopeful to look at the work that's being done by mayors around the world to transform their cities, whether it's with bike lanes, whether it's with bus lanes, whether it is working on safety interventions. It's an incredibly exciting moment in time for cities.
Things happen by chance. For instance, in the development of a city, sometimes a new illegal form will be made, like a market suddenly springs up in the street, and then it becomes absorbed into the fabric of the city. What I don't think should happen is that once something occurs by chance, it becomes there forever.
I mean, we have got to begin to rethink how we use territory, because otherwise we're in deep trouble. Look at Beijing now. The Chinese government has now decided to create 150 million metropolitan area. And the question has come up, how do you organize that kind of urban territory? Take London versus Sao Paulo. London has over 20 nodal points, which allow it to actually be fairly low rise, very few high rise, but it's not like the center of Sao Paulo, which means that there is an enormous distribution. So local residents can do a lot in their particular borough. But it's all London. London is an incredibly urban place. It's very low rise. And then you take Sao Paulo, where everything is very concentrated in the center, right? You need multinodal arrangements. Either do a London or play out at a totally different scale, where you take rural land extremely seriously and you make sure that it is a critical part of any urbanization. How do we create formats, territorial formats, that override the division rural-urban? So, in other words, you can take a very vast, replicate London, but on a totally different scale, where you have both rural and urban. So it's sort of a very distributed, very balanced thing. I don't think that is a terribly bad idea if you have a huge population and you don't have a lot of reasonable living. So I think where we are headed is in directions which, at their best, are going to, yes, generate densities. So the rural and the urban are not each one huge and separate, but are actually disassembled and made into smaller, more manageable spaces. And that you begin to override this notion there is a rural and there's an urban. Because the urban that we're creating, otherwise Mexico City, Sao Paulo, these are cities that are unmanageable. You cannot have cities after 20 million, I would say after probably 12 million, it becomes truly unmanageable. So we need to seriously rethink how we connect urbanization with closeness to rural spaces.
we can use technology very well to deal with how a city functions. But now we are using it to tell people what to do. I mean, this is a very complicated question. What I want is something that stimulates people to think inductively about where they are, for instance, about what kind of place is this, that gives them the tools to do that. And that we have the technology for that, but it is not a technology we're using. For instance, if you wanted to go, I have to give you a British example. You're in one neighborhood, you want to go someplace that's quite different. Simply getting a map of the quickest way to get there is unintelligent. You want to know what's the place like that you're going to, you know? If you take one route, what kind of experience will you have walking as opposed to another route? And for that, it takes a different kind of information than just drawing the shortest line between two things or showing people what public transport or how to drive there. My work, in part, the last 5 years or so, is how to use the technology so that you get a richer picture of the city.
Technology is changing the way we do everything. And I think that the internet providing that one-click transportation service has great potential. It's interesting to see now the opportunity that technology has brought to our streets and our cities to reimagine the space and the service that can be provided, whether it's transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. You can just click on a phone can bring you instant mobility, and that's brand new, and I think it's very exciting to see. I don't think it's too far on the horizon that we'll see autonomous vehicles in cities and that kind of technology. But it's important to frame the technology in a way that it serves cities and it serves people. And so that we are not just making the mistake of 50 years ago of prioritizing our streets for cars. We need to be using the technology to improve the quality of life for people. The future of cities is not behind the steering wheel. It's not about the car. I look at cities like Helsinki, which is using technology very, very differently. They're providing transportation as a service. So they are bundling all of the transportation options and putting it in one place. So you as a consumer can get any form of transportation literally at the click of a button, and creating this network that makes it easy to walk or to bike or take the train or get into a car share. I think those are the strategies of the future. And I think using the internet that way, I think that the potential is limitless about what we can do to better improve the mobility and accessibility of transportation to citizens around the world. You see the results in real time, and you don't have to wait for years of planning studies and years of computer modeling. You can change your streets now, and the proof of the performance is actually in the street itself. And I think it's a very important strategy to show what can happen. And showing the potential of what your street can be, the potential that's hidden in plain sight, is really important, because people are used to their streets looking the same way. That's the way they've looked the same way for 50 years, so they're not going to look any differently. And once you show what can be done, how you can actually reimagine a street that is 6 lanes and now includes a bike lane and a bus lane, a street that now is safer because you've extended the sidewalks or you've put in a plaza. The world of the possible is at your fingertips, and particularly when you move quickly to show how you can change the use of that space.
part of the issue for me also is this notion of open sourcing the neighborhood. Every member of the neighborhood, including the homeless person, including the child, has a knowledge about that part of the city that the codified experts, the codified knowledge of experts, the codified knowledge of government officials lacks. We become urban subjects rather than ethnic subject, religious. A good city at least contains moments within it when the particularity of each of us in terms of religion, race, class is neutralized, and we're all urban subjects.
Well, I feel very strongly that cities need to have a vision of where they are going. Mayor Bloomberg's Plan YC sustainability plan recognized that if we were going to continue to grow and thrive with 1 million more people in 2030, we needed to have different strategies for how we approached city government and city operations. And you need that plan because you have to set goals for where you're going to go. And I think once you have those goals that people buy into, it makes it much easier to transform the fabric of a city to be able to adapt to ongoing changes. So there's never one master plan that's going to be the plan, but you can set a framework of goals to shoot toward and hold people accountable for whether they make these goals and benchmarks or not. But to be able to provide options for how you get around and how you experience the city, very, very important. You know, the way that we're going to be able to grow and thrive and have supportive, strong neighborhoods and business districts, healthier cities, more sustainable cities, cities that you want to live and play and raise children in, are the kinds of cities that make it easy to walk around, easy to get around, that are affordable. And that's a critical part of the future of cities. Our streets are made of concrete and asphalt and steel, but it doesn't mean that they're laid in stone forever.
Los seres humanos no debemos preguntarnos nunca qué va a pasar, sino qué vamos a hacer. Es decir, esa idea de cómo van a ser las ciudades, como las hagamos nosotros. O sea, no hay nada escrito en ninguna parte. Todo lo que se está escribiendo ahora. Por lo tanto, la idea es un poco pasiva de que el futuro va a venir y tenemos que simplemente estar con los ojos abiertos porque no tenemos remedios frente a él. Nosotros tenemos que pensar cómo queremos que sean las ciudades. Queremos que las ciudades tengan espacios humanos, que sean ciudades donde pueda uno caminar, donde pueda uno encontrarse con otros. Queremos ciudades en las cuales todo haya que hacerlo dentro de un automóvil y nada puede hacerse fuera, cosas por el estilo. Eso es lo que tenemos que preguntarnos, cómo queremos que sea la ciudad y empujar las cosas para que sea así, la ciudad y todo lo demás. No nos conformemos nunca con eso de qué va a pasar, qué va a ser de nosotros, sino qué vamos a hacer para que ocurra lo que preferimos, ¿no?